Let's get going. Hi, everyone. We are very excited for this session. This is an Intel-sponsored session, but really we are joined together to discuss a really critical, I would even say national security problem, right? This is a real ecosystem problem, and what we try to make sure we provide for you today is a holistic perspective, right? So we are joined today by industry, government, academia, but also our global partners here from around the world to share their perspective. And I'm going to be introducing our esteemed panelists and experts, all good friends and colleagues, and I appreciate their attendance today. And we're going to talk about the future of the cyber workforce, and we're going to provide this global perspective. So some of the things we're going to touch upon include, of course, the national cybersecurity strategy in the United States from the White House, as well as the workforce strategy as we are reaching towards implementations, but also what the European Parliament and Union and the Commissions are doing, academia, some practical advice, industry, of course, as well as some insights from the State of Israel. I think we can all agree we have a lot of Israeli cyber companies here. You might have seen them in the expo floor or on stage. So we're going to be also hearing a little bit of that perspective. And I will disclose, you probably already noticed, I'm Israeli. But I'm also European, and I work for a global company, and I'm here living in California. My name is Dr. Amit El-Azhari. I'm currently the head of cybersecurity policy at Intel, but I'm leaving Intel and starting a new initiative. I'm going to call it a startup. It's called Open Policy. I also teach in UC Berkeley in the School of Information, Master in Cybersecurity program in Weizmann University. Woo! And I'm on advisory board for the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. And I'm very passionate about this issue because I would say my journey into security was untraditional. It was very much informed by the story of my sister. You might know Karen El-Azhari. She's a kind of a hacker, and she spoke many years ago about hackers as the immune system of the internet on the TED stage. So she, in a way, inspired me to kind of create my path into security. And I think that's the journey of all of us. The path to security is not linear. You know, we come from different backgrounds, and that's what makes this problem statement, on one side, more challenging with the threats that we're facing, but on the other side, so important. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. We have Peter Brown, Senior Advisor for Technology Policy for the European Parliament. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
We have Anne Cleveland, Executive Director of the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at UC Berkeley School of Information, my alma mater, where I did my PhD in the law. We have Mr. Sui Mo, Assistant Deputy Director for the please correct me if I'm wrong here I think I got it right? Assistant National Cyber Director in the Cyber Workforce Directorate for the Office of the National Cyber Director in the White House. And he's going to talk about some of the most important work on the national cybersecurity strategy that, by the way, we at Intel really appreciated, and we sent a statement of support, and you can read that online. And we have, of course, my Shalom, my fellow Israeli, a partner here, Mr. Aviram Atzba, Executive Director of International Cooperation in the Israeli National Cyber Directorate. Okay, so let's start. Our audience already knows a little bit about Peter and Sui and Aviram. Share with us, and we will start with Aviram on your side. Why are you passionate about addressing the cyber workforce problem? Why is this important for you?
Okay. Can you hear me? Great. Excellent. I would go for this question for something very personal. I have two daughters and a son. My two daughters, Rotem and Maya, are with a soul of artists. One of them has very good hand skills for drawing and for doing arts. The other one is a master baker. Both of them are in high-tech industry now. One of them is graduated from computer science. The other one is working in high-tech company. So how did we go from the arts to the computer sciences? And I would say that one of the components was that when they were young, in school, they were participating in an extracurriculum projects, 2 separate projects, together with industry, developing the know-how, the skills, but mainly the confidence of being able to deal with technology, with innovation. That's why I think that the core of everything that we will talk about is how to take the overall population and create this passion and trust in themselves to be able to join high-tech, to join technology, to join cybersecurity.
Amazing. And by the way, this is very, I will just share a personal story as well. Israel's mandatory service, actually, my sister often shares, and that's also my experience from the intelligence forces, is a key enabler in diversity. Because very early on in your life, at the age of 17 or 18, people from all backgrounds and from all genders and from all religions often, depends on the nature of course, of what we are doing, get the opportunity to participate and kind of have the opportunity to build that confidence in a large room.
Right.
So this is part of it is my own personal story. Please, Mr. Sui.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for me, you guys can hear me okay, right? So yeah, so for me, there's a personal reason, but there's also like a career reason, right? So the career reason and why I'm doing this work is the fact that cybersecurity as a career, cyber career I call them, is a good opportunity for people to make a good living, a good job, stay in your own community, and still serve your country, right? No matter whether your job is in the private sector or working for the government, you are protecting the community and the nation. So I think being able to be impactful and making sure that more people can actually do this work is sort of like what I'm striving for. And on a personal reason, the way I got into this career is that when my family first moved to the United States, we were selling fruits in Chinatown, New York. We had to sell a box of oranges a day just to eat, 3 boxes of oranges a day for the month to make rent. But orange by orange, box by box, my parents bought me my first computer that my teacher helped me assemble. That gave me the spark of wanting to do something in computing. When I was in college, my loans ran out, and I only had some extra money to actually do a 1-credit capstone. And a professor in cybersecurity was nice enough to allow me to take that 3-credit course as a 1-credit capstone so that I graduated with at least cybersecurity on my transcript, right? And yet, I still did not go into cybersecurity when I actually graduated, right? It is through a fellowship opportunity that allowed me to kind of do policy work in cybersecurity. And when I look at my life, I realized that I got really, really lucky, right? My parents bought a computer, I did that. A teacher helped me assemble it. The professor was nice enough to give me a 1-credit course on a 3-credit class, right? So my goal is to make sure there are more people like me to be able to do the work, hopefully at the White House, but don't have to go through the trouble that I did, right? To make sure that more people will be able to get on this journey much easier than the journey that I have been through in my life. So that's sort of like what prompted me to want to do this work, is to see, I want people to be able to see cyber career as a source of empowerment. I want them to be able to see this as a source of like pride and make an impact for the community. So that's why I'm very, very excited to talk about this topic and talk about this all day. I still believe that people are the most important resource in cyberspace, and we often forget about that.
That's an inspiring story. Anne.
Yeah, so Siyu, thanks so much for sharing that story. I think stories like that are what keep me inspired to work with students who might have a story somewhat like that at UC Berkeley. And I'll just name a few more things about why cybersecurity is a passion. We were talking about this before the panel. We're all poaching each other's cyber talent. There's not enough cyber talent, and whether you're in the private sector or in the public sector, we've got to stop poaching each other's talent and start expanding the pool of talent with people who coming from all kinds of different domain backgrounds and life experience backgrounds. I think two other things to name that my fellow panelists have remarked on are we need more diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity. We need more diverse and inclusive cybersecurity leadership. And so it's great to be able to be a part of that pipeline. And then we need more cybersecurity professionals with clear pathways into public service. I think there are a lot of established pathways into the private sector and less so for students to connect their passions for public service with organizations that need cybersecurity help in the public sector, in critical infrastructure, in community organizations like nonprofits. So that's what keeps me here.
This absolutely resonates with me and part of my passion as I go into my next initiative. Peter.
So two thoughts on that. Firstly, I was a student. I graduated in the early to mid 1980s in England. And in common with, I think, a lot of students today, I hadn't a clue what the hell I wanted to do. That's why I didn't major in a single subject. I covered political science, international politics, history, women's studies, racism, information technology, which was an emerging thing back then, and I did a mini thesis on user experience and user interaction design. Very novel back then. But I came out of university not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I like reassuring students today that not knowing what you want to do and having that openness to explore lots of different backgrounds, I think is going to be critical for the workforce of the future. This idea of cradle to grave, working in a single industry, maybe even in a single company or organization, from graduation until retirement, that's no longer the world we live in. The second thing is, and ironically, the flip side of that is, I graduated without a job, didn't know where the hell I was going to go, but I took the first job that came along, which happened to be in an European international organization, the Council of Europe, and I've stayed in public service since 1984 until today, with a career break for about 10 years when I was the trailing spouse and following my then partner, who was working in the US and worked as a consultant here in the US. So the second aspect about public service, and it's something I feel very strongly about, particularly in the sort of populist environment we're in and have been in the last few years, where we've tended to demonize public service and the public sector. We are reaping what we've sown with this sort of demonization, with the result that there are a lot of people who just don't see an interest in working in the public sector today. That's reflected both in restrictions on funding for posts in the public sector, whether that's in the US, where the same problems in the EU, and this sort of stereotype of, the lazy feds who don't do much work, the bloated Brussels bureaucrats, as we're known, that are just there for the money. These sort of stereotypes don't help when you're trying to recruit a workforce into the public sector when there is so much competition. But I'll leave it there because that's a theme to come back to as we go on.
So we really set the stage. We have some amazing challenges that we already discussed, right? Because these challenges are also our passion to change this. But we also know this is a critical moment. This is a matter of national security, right? That's global security, the security of users. So let's talk a little bit about the positive side, about the opportunities, and what are we doing all together to address that? And this is part of my passion, and I think this is where I will really miss Intel, because I'm going to miss my colleagues here in the room, Anshul and Brian. And what are they doing to help community colleges and education in this area? Because this is part of the passion where we understand that addressing this will require not just global cooperation and global perspectives, but all the communities, right?
Yeah.
So we are operating with, at Intel, we work with top universities, but we also spend a lot of our time with a diverse talent in community colleges. If you want to hear more about it, my colleagues here are in the room. So let's move to the opportunities, and I want to start. I'm seeing you, Neo Sui, like, yes, yes. Tell
like, I'm
us
ready to
what
go.
the White House, and I'm seeing, of course, here we have Camille Stewart in the room from the White House, Force of Nature on all this work as well, and we were excited to collaborate on this as well in the White House. Tell us, what is the administration doing?
So I'm sure all of you have read the National Cybersecurity Strategy, right?
Everyone.
So if I do a test right now, we're gonna pass, right? But anyways, you know, so the National Cybersecurity Strategy is sort of like, you know, had a vision of a more affirmative vision for cyberspace, right? That is value-based, that is defensible, and then that's resilient. But there are two shifts from that strategy. The first shift is the responsibility should move from individual to the big players with the means and ability to actually create, design, and secure cyberspace, right? So what that means is that we will need people with a certain skills to be able to build those cyberspace. You're not just gonna get that overnight. So that's problem number one. We need people with skills to build cyberspace that is resilient and secure. And the second shift is we need organizations to start making long-term investments, right? Oftentimes you hear about workforce problem, we're always trying to kind of fill the current jobs, and we keep doing all these different strategies, and yet here we are, we still need even more people. That's because we have not invested long-term in creating a pipeline for us to have the adaptable and dynamic workforce that we need for the future. So what we are doing, as instructed by the National Cybersecurity Strategy, we are also writing, as part of the implementation, the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy. We're still drafting right now, but I can kind of share some big ideas to perhaps maybe draw in some folks in discussion and maybe have some questions afterwards. So here are the big ideas, right? We've tried many, many things, yet demand for cyber workforce still exceeds supply tremendously. So what we want to do is we want to recommend 3 imperatives that we want to do. First, it has to be an ecosystem approach. Like what Amit was saying earlier, we need companies working with community colleges, working with government, working with K-12 education, working with university. We need to have more ecosystems around the country so that we can create the cyber workforce that we need, right? In areas that we don't have it, perhaps we can spark something. In areas we have it, we can support it. In areas with ecosystem really working, perhaps we can look into scaling. But really, it is the coordination and collaboration between employers, educators, institutions like Berkeley, right, which I hope you will cover one of the great programs that I really like from Berkeley, to make this work, to create the workforce that we want. The second imperative is about skills, right? You know, if I have to think about, if I was working on AI workforce 5 years ago, I would have focused on like image recognition or whatever, right? Instead of like large language models, right? In this case, what we want to do here is if we equip every American with some form of foundational cyber skills, and then some of them will eventually get further more skills to get into cybersecurity workforce, that's the pathway that we want, right? So we want to make sure that everyone can reap the benefits of cyberspace and our digital economy and provide them an opportunity to get a well-paying good job in the future, right? And finally, we have to do a much better job with diversity and inclusion, right? It is a strategic advantage that the United States has. We need to tap into the diversity of our country so that we can protect a diverse nation, right? So, and you know, and there's a benefit of like, hey, that's the quickest way to actually get more people into the workforce is go to communities that have not been approached about this opportunity. So those are the 3 imperatives that we're thinking about. You know, we'd love to hear ideas and thoughts after this, if you guys have any questions about that. And finally, what I would say is we're thinking about it very holistically. What I want everyone to remember about the strategy is that there's only so much federal government can do to build a workforce. At the end of the day, no single stakeholder in the ecosystem can make a change at such a big scale to meet the demand of the workforce, right? We need everyone to buy in. So it's our hope that this strategy, it's a whole of nation strategy, whole of society. We want you to be able to see yourself in the strategy, right? This is a call for you to contribute to this effort. So that's that.
You know, engagement is so critical on so many levels. Well, Peter, we already
Yeah.
heard a little bit about, public sector, and
Yeah.
you have a really interesting perspective because not only are you sharing here with, the thoughts, and I'm inviting you to share the thoughts of how the European Parliament and European Union and Commission are looking at this, and Council, but also from the perspective of a large organization, right? The European Parliament, that it's protecting itself.
Yeah.
What are your challenges as you're trying to attract that talent, to skill
Yeah,
it
indeed.
as large organization addressing considerable threats?
Yeah, so I'm lucky or unlucky, depends on your perspective, to be sort of a policy analyst and advisor actually within the operational IT services of the Parliament. So we've got we have a eat your own dog food approach, which is when proposed European legislation is coming down the pike and Parliament is one of the co-legislators. I won't go into the legislative process, that's for another session. But our job in my unit is to analyze potential legislation to see what the impact is on ourselves as an operational IT, DevSecOps, the whole slew of IT services. CEO asked a question to the audience. I'm going to do the same. This was probably a little crueler, which is, how many of you have heard of the European Union Cyber Skills Framework? Oh, good, there are a few there. That's excellent. So one thing about that skills framework, which I found interesting, was it broke this monolithic idea that cybersecurity requirements are sort of limited to one particular domain, coders and security professionals, because it covers everything from the CISO, but through to audit, governance issues, HR issues, psychology, anthropology issues in terms of user behavior and everything else. And I think the one thing we noticed, and that goes a bit with the grain of the concept of a public servant who should be polyvalent and able to take on any challenge within reason, but this idea that even in the domain as specific as cybersecurity, you're not just looking at people with IT backgrounds. You're looking at people who have the anthropology, psychology, political science, building
Legal.
engineers, legal, urban planning. All of these issues have an impact. I mean, the European Parliament, we're not only responsible for our whole IT infrastructure, but also how that IT infrastructure is increasingly embedded in our buildings with sensors and actuators throughout something like, I think it's 15 million square feet of real estate, how all that works together and is secure with that increased attack surface that we've got. We're pretty clear about what we want and what we need. The biggest challenge I think we have is, what do potential recruitees want? I mean, salary and benefits, we can certainly offer that. We can offer job security. We can offer reasonably competitive salaries, particularly at the start of career, with the exception of the domain of cybersecurity, where it's just off the charts in terms of what people are able to get. Where we are challenged is being able to respond to the sort of things that cybersecurity professionals are more accustomed to, either expecting or looking forward to, which is job flexibility, innovative approaches to problem solving, and we have to deal with that in a context where we're still, unfortunately, a very hierarchical, quite rigid, bureaucratic, top-down organization. So as an organization that is both looking at the policy about future skills, but also having to recruit people for our own cybersecurity service, where I don't think I'm giving away any trade secrets here. Normally when there is an open recruitment process for officials in the European Parliament, you might be offering 50 posts and you will get something like 15,000 applicants initially. The last recruitment process we did for 22 posts for cybersecurity experts, at the close of nominations, we had 12 respondents, and that was on the basis of offering, the real highlight of what we were, of the job opportunities were there. So we recognize that the way we're recruiting and the way we're trying to attract people is wrong, that this model is no longer working, it's not fit for purpose, and we have to be more flexible in terms of what we can offer, And it goes to the point, I think, that Sia was mentioning as well, you know, this breaking out of that mold of sort of cradle-to-grave career in a single organization, recognizing that people are going to come in, go out, that they're going to take their experience from us and work in the private sector or elsewhere, but also hopefully return to us with experiences they've got from the private sector. And I think that's something we're going to be looking for more.
That's really inspiring. And, you know, we already touched a little bit about the role of academia, right? And education. And, you know, I come from that background as well, and Berkeley provided me some opportunities. And I still teach because I'm very passionate about it. And I want to invite Anne to share some views from the perspective of the center, but on all that amazing role of academia, right, in this ecosystem, in collaboration between our partners, in collaboration in industry, and I already mentioned what we do with community colleges. But specifically, in addition to kind of that general perspective, what are we doing with addressing the skilling opportunities? Because we all know how critical it is to have, you know, practical opportunities to really experience what it means to be in the cyber profession. And
Oh, thanks, Amit. She's one of our proudest alumni. And I should start by just recognizing Berkeley's Master of Information and Cybersecurity degree program. Many of alumni and students are here in the room, so it's really great to see you. So that's part of what we're doing on the skilling.
absolutely.
But more broadly, so much of what CU and Peter said resonates, and I think what we can contribute to this conversation is actually a specific instance or a specific solution to the generalizable problem that you were talking about. CU, you talked about, you know, building an ecosystem, and you talked about this interdisciplinary need among cyber professionals. And so at UC Berkeley in 2018, we pioneered something that we called a cybersecurity clinic. And this is a course that students can take under the supervision of a professor or a cybersecurity professional, modeled after clinics in law and medicine, where students work pro bono with a real-world organization to build their cybersecurity defenses. Berkeley's clinic works with nonprofits that are at higher risk of politically motivated cyber attack. And so you can think of these as the kinds of organizations that are community organizations. They're below the cyber poverty line. They may have 10 or 20 employees, probably not even an IT professional, much less somebody specialized in cybersecurity. And yet, you know, one organization's security is everyone's security, and so they're part of this national security equation as well. And we've found some interesting things from starting this cybersecurity clinic. One, it tends to attract a talent pool of students from across campus that aren't necessarily in disciplines traditionally associated with cybersecurity. You talked about urban planning and the law and public policy. And because the clinic has such a sense of purpose and mission orientation, we have students, particularly women, but all kinds of students who tell us, I wouldn't have seen a pathway into cybersecurity except for the opportunity to participate in this clinic. The other thing that we're seeing is there is actually a growing movement for cybersecurity clinics. So I mentioned Berkeley's clinic, but roughly around the same time, we found that MIT and the University of Alabama and the University of Indiana, among others, also had cybersecurity clinics, all doing a slightly different flavor, but all providing pro bono cyber defense to organizations in need in their community, whether that was rural municipalities, small businesses, and the list goes on. And so we're building a movement. We're building a movement of cybersecurity clinics across the nation, whether they're university-based, college-based, community college-based. There's a role for institutions of higher education to play this role in public service back to their communities while training the next generation of leaders in cybersecurity who have that hands-on experience to go get that first job. And so we founded a consortium of cybersecurity clinics. Our vision is to have a university or college or community college-based cybersecurity clinic in every state in the country by 2030. And we're about 20% of the way there. There's 10 clinics operating now nationally in different states. We actually provided a response to the ONCD's request for information on the cybersecurity workforce. And if we have time for that conversation, we'll tell you what we asked the feds for to help continue to build that movement.
But just to so these are the ecosystems I was talking about, right? Because the community knows what, they're closest to the community, right? So the local ecosystem can solve problems that someone like me from DC won't understand, but because you are here, or people in Alabama were in Alabama, so they have specific things that they can do, and that's how you can kind of create a pipeline that way. So I think that's a great program.
That is so inspiring, and it's again, as I will share with my personal story. I mean, I get so much out of teaching. I teach in the Master in Cybersecurity program, and it's such a joy because when you get to interact with these students and hear their perspective, from all these backgrounds, not only do you have the opportunity to stay agile on what is, coming, but also you are just inspired through that conversation. So, as our Mr. Mo, Siwu, as you shared with our group, we all have a part of it, and it's important to note, sponsorship, mentorship, that's not just, in university, it's in our personal relationship. It's something that we can do every day, right, as we share our experiences, our stories. And with that, Aviram, there's a lot of Israeli talent right here in San Francisco. In our expert floor, Israel is known for the startup nation, for the cyber technology, and I think our audience is wondering, what's the secret sauce? Tell us, what are we doing in Israel to really address these opportunities in enabling the workforce?
I think that there is no secret sauce. There is a combination of spices that make this masala.
Shakshuka, hummus.
Yeah. And one thing is the need. We understand the need, we feel it in a daily basis. So people, young people and professionals are engaged to a need and they understand it. Second thing is that we are looking across the lifespan of the workforce, starting from high schools or even schools, going through high schools, the military, and I will get to the military back because this is another major spice, continuing through the workforce itself and up to the academia and the development of new knowledge. We are dealing with a discipline that needs all the time new knowledge and new know-how. We have programs in each one of those stages in the lifespan to encourage the market, to encourage the people to go and look for knowledge and go and look for the jobs. Second thing is that, as you said, we are not doing it from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, from the government. We are really doing it as a joint venture between government and industry and the Ministry of Education and the NGOs. And the force that is driving it is the market, not us as government. We are facilitating, they are driving it. It's a very different perspective than having the government sitting in the driver's seat and having the industry helping them. It's the other way around. So as I told you at the beginning that my two daughters were part of some kind of extracurriculum education, the driver there is industry. Ministry of Education goes along with it. I will give you 3 examples of 3 programs like that. The first one is, and I have this for the numbers, is the Magshimim. We understood that having the workforce coming from the area of Tel Aviv, the center of Israel, is wasting a huge portion of our talent. Because a lot of talent is in the periphery geographically, but also socially. And this program enables to take kids, high school age, and do extracurriculum program with them to promote them for cybersecurity. Previous to this program, like 12 years ago, before it started, 3% of the IDF elite technological units came from the periphery. 97% came from Tel Aviv area. Nowadays, 40% come from the periphery.
Wow.
So it's not a minor change. It's a national impact on the workforce. And imagine what other benefits it brings to the periphery, that those kids now have better salaries, they are part of the high-tech industry, they are downstairs in those booths selling high-tech innovation and contributing back to their communities. Second program that I would like to mention is Mamriot. We found out that 0.5% of our population is not participating as it should in our workforce, which is girls, women. And we have specific program for young women, again, high school age, together with the Ministry of Education, together with the military. And in that specific program, 70% of the graduates, which are all women, go to the military, to technological units, and then to the high-tech industry. And in the next 5 years, our plan is to have 100,000 girls participating in this program. So we are speaking about, again, a major impact to our economy, to our social inclusiveness of our workforce for cybersecurity. And the third program, again, 3 out of many other programs, is Gsharim. Gsharim is a joint venture between 8200 and the Ministry of Education. We found out that one of the main problems that we have is lack of teachers. Not enough teachers to teach cybersecurity. And it's very difficult to develop them. So 8200 took upon themselves to train soldier teachers. So it's young girls, 18 years old. They are screened and they are taught cybersecurity to the basic level, and they are the teachers who are helping in schools. Again, the first year, 20,000 students passed through this process.
Wow.
It's 850 groups of learning, and those small, relatively small initiatives make a global impact, or at least, well, it is a global impact because afterwards they're coming here.
Thank you.
So make a global impact on the economy. I think that those examples try to illustrate that the need for industry together with the government, and for us, the military, which I think, if you are asking about the sauce, the military is a secret sauce because it is a huge incubator. You take young students who have some kind of knowledge but no experience, and after passing through the military, they are professionals. So finding the way in your countries to have this incubation phase from the theoretical knowledge, as you mentioned, like some kind of lab like this, to get the hands-on experience is crucial for the industry and for the workforce.
That's absolutely
I
amazing.
just want to thank Israeli training program because it's really helpful for us, you know, to have,
Thank you, thank you.
to have your workers come to the U.S. But I think one of the points that I kind of want to reiterate what you said, which is, I think when you do cybersecurity, people always talk about like, what is the one big change that can move the needle, right? But when you talk about workforce development, it's just not that simple. You have to do a lot of things right to kind of cultivate. It's almost like gardening, you know, like because people take a long time. So you're like, you have to do many, many things right. You have to constantly adjust to actually get the workforce that you want, right? And then a solution that works in your country might not work in our country. Something that works in Berkeley might not work in Alabama, right? But you have to do a lot of small little stuff like changing job descriptions, modifying some of the curriculum, or giving access to experiential learning like the clinic, right? Maybe some national training program like the military. You kind of have to do it all to sort of figure out what works for the community in the country. And I think as we're writing a strategy, that's what we learn. I think the administration, that's the approach that we're taking from the administration, which is to take a lot of all these best practices that we see around the world and around the country and try to sort of say like, here are the goals and the guideposts for everyone in this country, and whatever that makes sense to you, implement that, right? And then we will be partner and try to collaborate with, you know, state and local government, private sector, nonprofit, institutions to kind of change whatever that needs to be changed to make sure that we can start producing the people that we need.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, one other comment just to sort of segue from that is looking again at the policy side, and the European Parliament is literally this week looking at the draft Cybersecurity, Cyber Resilience Act, which is going to cover the whole sort of landscape of IoT ecosystems and how they're regulated in the EU. One thing that we added to the Commission's proposal was a section around skills, saying we cannot forget that in order to do all these wonderful things, you've got to have people to actually have the skill set to be able to do it. And there's one particular category that I would like to call out, which I think is overlooked a lot in all of this. And it goes to the point about, you're only as secure as your weakest link. And that is the certification and conformity assessment bodies. These tend to be undervalued, understaffed, underpaid, and underutilized organizations, but which are critical to certifying and conforming and giving assessments to organizations to say that the cyber products that you're putting out there are conformant with the standards, the regulations, and whatever is required in a particular geopolitical space. If that part of the equation is not properly funded and skilled, we have a problem, because we can do everything we want upstream in education and building a cyber workforce. But if everything we're putting on the market and that we're working on assumes a conformity with a certain set of standards, which have been assessed by overworked, underpaid assessors who are skimping on their work, or they're not just don't have the time to be able to do their job properly, we have a serious problem. And in the Cyber Resilience Act, there's a specific call out there to say we've got to ensure that the assessment bodies are properly funded, that there is a proper separation to avoid conflicts of interest, that they're not involved in certifying things that they might have a financial interest in and things like that. But for me, that certification process is sort of an underpinning and is absolutely critical to having the workforce to be able to keep it going.
This really resonates with me, and Peter, you mentioned the EU Cyber Resilience Act, and this is a very comprehensive and complex product security regulation that is now being proposed in Europe. I'm going to say it's kind of like the GDPR++, because it looks at CE marking, right? So enforcement in the point of entry. And it also interacts, of course, with the GDPR and privacy and other regimes. And you also touched on the importance of, how can we leverage this moment, right, for workforce and development, etc. I want to invite our audience to think about another type of workforce, one that a lot of my prior work was focused on: hackers, security researchers. By the way, a lot of the individuals that are engaged in what we often called ethical hacking, and what my sister says is friendly hacking. They come from all over the world. They come from all over the world, and they get introduced to this profession through tinkering and embracing the hacker mindset. Sometimes they're participating in bug bounties. I see here my friend Andrew from Google in the room. Google, thank you for the bug bounty many years ago. It inspired me, among others, to work with hackers. And I hope as we consider the EU Cyber Resilience Act, we also embrace the importance to work and enable the security research community, which I also understand is really a critical priority, not just for CLTC, because you supported my prior work on this, Disclose.io, but also Israel. Of course, our administration in the Office of National Cyber Director. I saw how, Director Inglis and, of course, now Acting Director Walden is continuing with this mission, and Jen Easterly on embracing the hackers, right, and kind of considering issues around contracts and how we can address some legal concerns around anti-hacking laws, what we call Disclose.io, and that is something you can also look at, and I think it's discussed in the right now in the Secure by Design document that we have seen for the administration. So this is an interesting moment to think about how we can also think about hackers,
It's
right?
timely. I mean, the European Parliament, just yesterday, the lead committee looking at the Cyber Resilience Act was considering an amendment proposed by Parliament. It's not yet part of the law, but we hope it will be.
Oh, this is a real
which gives white hat hackers coverage. Well, the phrase we use, I think, is ethical hackers. I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it says, if you are working as an ethical hacker or a security professional, and keeping a manufacturer informed of what you found in terms of a vulnerability or something, and you're working with them, you will be exempt from the mandatory disclosure requirements that are otherwise required in the regulation. It's a way to sort of encourage innovation and manufacturers to work with that sector and say, if you do the right thing and you've got people out there, out in the sort of wild west of the hacker community who are also looking to do the right thing, and you work together to patch some potential vulnerability before something goes on the market, or even after it's on the market, you will not have to face that sort of walk of shame to the vulnerability disclosure that is required elsewhere. And I think that's a step forward to including that community.
Well, we just also, Intel is one of the founding members of the Hacking Policy Council, and it kind of interacts with some of the proposals the Council have made on the EU Cyber Resilience Act, so we are excited to hear this.
They've sent us their briefing.
Look forward to continue this discussion, and I would say, vulnerability disclosure programs are really, really important, and that's an important piece of the puzzle. And with that, I want to leave time for at least one question, so I would like to invite our panelists just to give us 30 seconds, kind of one takeaway, and maybe you can also focus on, Aviram, you mentioned the shakshuka, right? All the spices coming together.
That's a bit too
right?
specific.
We have
of a
your
salad.
global perspective. What can be the key, specifically in global collaboration, to enable the workforce? Go ahead.
I'm not sure it's the key, but one key aspect is sitting here together.
Engagement.
No, the EU and the United States. You spoke about regulation. If we could have reached some kind of agreement on some kind of global regulation, in cyberspace, it's crucial. Since it's global, and since workforce moves from one place to another, some kind of alignment in cybersecurity regulation as a whole, and specifically in workforce, could be a huge leap forward.
Amazing. A treaty. Yeah.
I think for me, it's about, keep sharing best practices. I think, the United States, or any countries for the matter of, we get things right, we get things wrong. And I think be willing to learn from each other. I think it's key, to move forward on this. I think we can do a better job on that.
You stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing, to make sure that we're sharing the innovations and sharing what works. Actually, in our consortium of cybersecurity clinics, we have participants from Peru and Indonesia and Switzerland. And we're learning from innovators looking at workforce development in other countries and other states as well. So when you find something that works, don't keep it to yourself.
In a word, diversity, not just in the background of people we're looking to recruit into the industry, diversity of geography, of race, gender, social class, all of the different backgrounds, which give it a much richer field with which to work with, but also diversity in the skill set. As I've said, cybersecurity is not a monolithic trade. It's something that requires, it's multidisciplinary, and I think that when people start to realize that, they realize that there's something they can contribute to. And the value of public service, I think it's absolutely essential here.
And I would just add, public-private partnerships. Yeah. Industry is excited to work with you, including my Intel colleagues here in the room. I was hoping that we will have time, but we are at time. But I have to apologize. I need to run. Actually, I'm going to talk with some peers on these important issues and continue, of course, our conversations. But maybe if our audience wants to engage, there is always an opportunity on social media, LinkedIn, public-private engagement. And maybe we'll stay around. Just hopefully, I want to make sure that if we need to leave the room, we clear out it. So maybe outside. But let me just thank our audience and thank our experts. This has been the Intel sponsored session.